Housing generally has not ranked high on the scale of priorities for social spending, and state governments have tended to rely upon local authorities to meet the problem. Efforts at providing low-cost rural housing have been minimal, despite the creation of the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria in 1977. And shanty towns and slums are common in urban areas. Overcrowding in urban housing is a serious problem. It has been estimated that about 85% of the urban population live in single rooms, often with 8 to 12 persons per room. Living conditions are generally poor.
Housing and affordable housing is the focus now of this administration. First, because the housing industry has so many aspects to it. It is capital intensive, so we employ a lot of people. It also employs both skilled and unskilled labor. And when you own a house, you become a stakeholder in society, and you are then going to protect that society. And then, once you have paid a certain amount of equity, you can actually have an asset to borrow from banks and go into business and therefore create wealth. So housing is the cornerstone of developing good citizens, of stimulating this economy. If you notice, when the United States suffered a meltdown, President Obama said, go and bring out all your construction projects. You know, we need to get our people working. And Nigerians they deserve decent housing at affordable prices. I don't want to put people in what we used to call in those days boys' quarters or barracks. We want a habitat that has all the amenities, social amenities, recreational amenities, and good quality housing. And there are new technologies that have come into this country that can deliver that quality.
Africa and Asia together will account for 86% of all growth in the world's urban population over the next 4 decades, according to the 2011 revision of the World Urbanization Prospects, produced by the United Nations Population Division of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs. According to the DESA report, the projected increase in urban populations in Nigeria and India in the next 40 years will be higher than that of the past 4 decades. The report, which describes this population increase as unprecedented, added it will pose new challenges in terms of jobs, housing, and infrastructure. All governments in Nigeria since independence have highlighted housing as a major priority.
It is true that housing is one of the basic needs of human beings. And of course, for quite some time, our government has not given much attention to housing programs. The reason simply being that over the years, government programs of the past had failed. But, you know, nobody has studied the reason why those programs failed. It is just on record that several programs of government in the past failed. And therefore, people are just skeptical about government programs again. And therefore, subsequent people who come into governance do not see it worthwhile, you know, having government programs in housing again. This has continually been the issue for a couple of decades. But this present administration seems to be conscious of the issue of housing. And I think in the transformational agenda, you know, housing has featured in it. And that's the reason why, you know, the present administration has created a specific Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. That's a big step forward, you know, in showing that there is commitment, you know, about housing. I head the Federal Housing Authority, which is a parastatal of the Federal Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. And we have been in existence for about 37 years today. We've gone through several federal government programs in the past, that got derailed. And so at one point, government even attempted to commercialize the agency and make it operate like a company on its own, now without funding. So they removed the Federal Housing Authority from the budget, about 10 years ago, for it to sustain itself, if it can, operating on the Company and Allied Matters Act, instead of an agency of government as a civil service organization. Having been removed from the budget, we were to be commercialized, but the commercialization process was not completed by the Bureau for Public Enterprise, and therefore we are neither here nor there. And so how we survive is by borrowing money from the banks. So you see that our products are not cheap, our products are not subsidized because of the high cost of fund under which we borrow to build. Second source of funding is the internally generated resources that we try to generate from maintenance and management of the estates that we have. From there, we generate some revenue, to be able to carry out our programs.
Unfortunately, for 50 years of its independence, Nigeria is yet to develop a vibrant mortgage market, and houses continue to be provided through the tortuous traditional method of buying land and building over some years, which could be an individual's entire lifetime. In many cases, such buildings are left uncompleted, or individuals have to deplete their entire life savings in order to build a home. Lack of basic infrastructure like roads, water and electricity is a major challenge to providing affordable housing, which accounts for about 30% of housing costs. In most cases, developers have to provide the infrastructure, which invariably increases the cost of the houses they produce, thus making such houses unaffordable. High cost of building materials is also a key factor that has led to the high construction costs in Nigeria.
Housing challenges in this country is almost a crisis, you see, but people are playing with it because we have this hereditary culture or extended family culture, and therefore people don't seem to see the housing challenges in Nigeria as a crisis, but it's a real crisis. Now, come to think of it, in a small home, you'll find out that a family of 12 or more, could be scampering in one small two-bedroom house, or 3 at best. But that's overcrowding. It's not good enough. But because this is our home, communal sharing, cultural sharing, and all that, and people take pleasure in saying this is our home, and so on. So you find a 40-year-old person still dwelling in his father's compound. It's not supposed to be so. In developed nations, a child of 18 years old leaves the parents, and stays on his or her own, whether employed or not employed. You see, so in such a culture, you must have to provide, housing, for the population. Otherwise, you see, the crisis will be so glaring that you will not be able to handle your governance. But you see, social housing is not a private venture. It is a government venture. Because, you see, housing is a capital-intensive venture. And therefore, if it is to be subsidized, except the government takes it up, directly, to provide housing. Otherwise, it will not work. The private developer is obtaining funds at a very high cost. He cannot go to develop social housing, because he's only interested in his profit. So you cannot afford to develop small houses, sell at small price, and then you will not make the profit, with high cost of funds. You see, so we need a protracted, mortgage system, that would enable people to be able to obtain loans, at very low cost of funds, to be able to acquire homes or build homes, as the case may be.
With an estimated national population of 150 million people, rising population growth rate, growing urbanization, as well as increased demand for sustainable housing across the country, the Minister of Land, Housing and Urban Development, Ahmad Pepple, says the only way to avert an imminent housing crisis in the foreseeable future is to immediately embark on concrete actions to reduce the housing deficit. The minister explained that the sustained intervention in the housing sector will increase the housing stock and substantially reduce the deficit in sustainable and decent homes, which is presently estimated to be between 16 to 17 million housing units. In order to ameliorate the present conditions in the housing sector, the federal government has recognized the need to accord priority to some key initiatives. These include the review of the National Housing Policy, review of the National Building Code, and targeting of low-income earners in the delivery of affordable houses under social housing.
Before this administration, there was absolutely nothing about housing for the less privileged, or what you call social housing, in Nigeria. It was never a part of the housing policy. But with this administration, and under the direction of the Honourable Minister for Lands, Housing, Urban Development, Ms. Ahmad Pepple, CFR, the housing policy of Nigeria and the urban development policy has been updated, reviewed. And not only do we have a mention of social housing for the first time, we have social housing occupying a full chapter, a dedicated chapter, Chapter 8 in the National Housing Policy of Nigeria. And the import or the purport of this is that when it has already gone through the review process, it's gone through the First National Council on Housing, organized by her, which means all the stakeholders, all the states came and endorsed it. So it's finally going to the final phase. It's actually gone before the National Economic Team as well, and it was very, very well supported. It's finally going to the Federal Executive Council before it becomes a policy. And Nigerians have had a kind of the Nigerian definition of social housing, which is not just for the poor. We have the no income, we have the low income, and then we have the low medium income. And no income means no income, you're earning nothing. The aged, the socially challenged, and the elderly and all that. Then the low income talks about people on the minimum wage, national minimum wage. But we realized that that was not realistic within the Nigerian context, because a man on level 5 is not on national minimum wage, but that man cannot afford a house on his own. Even a man on level 10, you'll be surprised. So we had the third category, which is what we call the low medium income, which is people earning as much as 3 times the national minimum wage, and we're looking something in the neighborhood of 70,000 or so. So today marked the third and final phase. The first phase is the thought phase. The second phase is the policy phase. The third phase is the implementation phase. And we have the ministerial team on housing delivery that have partners and networked with such social housing advocacy groups like the Social Housing Advocacy Group, is there, and other well-meaning people, including the Senate, because right now I'm sure you know that there's a bill on social housing that is before the Senate, sponsored by the distinguished Senator Professor Ayade. So much is going on. On the policy aspect, it's being on the legislative aspect is going on. But today, we have the foundation for the implementation aspect, which is where you have the pilot phase. And it's so exciting. I'll just briefly take you around it. In this project, for once, we're not having all these low-cost, low-quality buildings. We're having a 4-story building that is going to come under the integrated housing model. What that means is that we're going to have the 3 bedrooms, we're going to have the 2 bedrooms, we're going to have the 1 bedroom. Now, the 3 bedrooms will likely go on what you call the affordable platform, which is going to be subsidized, but is going to be a little more than the construction cost, because here we have land given free by ASO, and that is amazing. So we have land given free. So the 3 bedrooms is going to go at a cost that is going to be much, much lower than the market value. But we'll add a little thing on top. Let's assume that a 3 bedroom in this location goes for as much as 22 million. But we've realized that the construction cost of that 3 bedroom is probably something in the neighborhood of 10 million. Now, if the cost of land is taken out, and probably the cost of infrastructure, I said probably, you realize that the real cost is about 10 million. If you sell it for 15 million, it becomes profitable and yet affordable. You can now use that as a cross-subsidy to subsidize the 2 bedroom that would probably go for 10 million in a location like this. You find out that you can cross-subsidize it to go for some in the neighborhood of 6.5 million, which is about half the price. And then the 1 bedroom, you can actually give it out for as low as 1 or 1.5 million. I think by any stretch of imagination, we have been able to provide a platform where between the low income and the low medium income, they can be accommodated. And what's more exciting about this project is that we're working in partnership with the Federal Mortgage Bank, which means that it comes with a 20 to 25 years mortgage facility. The only difference is that the Honorable Minister has insisted that our recommendations from the ministerial team be adopted, which means that it must be need-based.
Now, it must be need-based, fine.
Yes.
But what machinery have you put in place to ensure that it is not hijacked?
I tell you, one of the machineries, I can say this without having to, feel whatever about it, I can tell you, is that whoever, by law, by agreement, which is going to be criminal if you breach it, it must be honor. The person that owns it must be the one living in it. Now, I want to see a permanent secretary who is going to come and live there in a 1-bedroom apartment. It's not going to happen. I want to see a director who's going to want to come and live in a 1-bedroom apartment, and we'll tie the contract such that it's going to be on oath, if you take this building and you're not the one living on it, and I'll say this again. No, you can't. It's going to be a crime for you to rent out the property. You can't do it. You see, for once, Nigerians need to get to know that you can do things and do it right. I foresee a situation where we are going to have to give certain guidelines for people who are interested. I foresee a situation where a day is going to be marked up. And please, if you are not living in Abuja, don't even bother wasting your time for the Abuja buildings when we go to Lagos, because you must be the one living in that building. Okay? I foresee a day where all the people that had applied would come to a central point. And we are going to carry out an open balloting, probably the system that we used in Akwa Ibom State, which, I mean, if we had time, I'll tell you what it was, but it ended up. And by the time the answers are out and the beneficiaries come out openly one after the other, Nigerians will say, yes, we knew it could be done. It can be done, and it is going to be done.
Now you've started with Abuja.
Yes.
I mean,
now what we now do is throw the challenge out to other state governments and other local governments. Already local governments have been saying they're waiting for a pilot. And once they see the way it is, which we have taken up, they're saying, look, we're willing to give land, we're willing to give infrastructure. So this pilot becomes like a template that we're going to use in others. The state government are already starting to call, and we're like, look, this is the template. Are you willing to follow the template? You give us land, you give us the infrastructure, and we insist a minimum of 80%, if not 100%, must go by our template, which is free and fair, need-based. It's not for political settlements and considerations, no. For this particular scheme, it's going to be need-based where it has a social housing component. For the affordable housing, we may not have so much control over it. But for the social housing, we're not going to collect land free and then draw a wool over the eyes of Nigerians.
The goal of providing affordable housing can be achieved, but the necessary ingredients have to be put in place. Investors can work in difficult environments in the short term if there is convincing evidence that reforms that will improve the investment climate will be implemented as quickly as possible. The 11 housing reform legislations must be passed without further delay. In doing this, the goal of ensuring macroeconomic stability, like keeping inflation and interest rates down, must not be missed.
We'd love to hear from you. Do you have a comment or questions? Do send them to us by email on ffile@channelstv.com.